We've been using NetBeans to do our programming, but today we're going to use PuTTY because we're going to need to use Structurizer to. Sorry, we're going to need to use SubmitJ to test our program for this looping technique. Let's hop into PuTTY. I'll explain why this is important. It changes, make it a little bit easier to read. Now you guys know that you can copy. Well, all of the files that I do for this class are accessible to you. So if you want to copy any of my files over just as a template for your own code, you can just do cp/home/gpcourser/cs116, copy everything in there you want. Or you can just go in there and open it up in Pico. You can't change it, you can't edit it, but you can view it, and you can copy it over and edit it in your own subdirectory. So all this code that I'm doing, like this program 3, I don't have it finished, of course, but it has the template for everything, so you can absolutely use that if you want to. So I'm going to do another thing called HasNext, and what I want you to be keeping in mind is we're going to use a HasNext idea for doing a loop in program 4. So I'm just going to do mkdir HasNext. HasNext is going to be the name of the public class that I'm going to make. So I'm going to do cd HasNext, and I'm going to put I'm going to create an input data file that has 5 numbers in it, say. So input.data. Sorry, it's going to be Pico input.data, and I'll just have 5 numbers in it: 34, 76, 21, 99, 88. There's 5 numbers. Doesn't matter how you put them in. You could have spaces between it, tabs, enter key, whatever you want to do. So Control O, Control X, and now you can see I have input.data. Now I'm going to create a program to loop through these records, or these numbers. We did the loop concepts on Tuesday, right? So you kind of got a taste of what it is that a loop looks like. Now let's just try tackling a simple one. We're just going to loop through those numbers and print them out. That's all we're going to do. But we got to figure out when we're at the end of the loop. How the hell do we know that? We use this HasNext thing. So basically, Pico HasNext .java, and we have a nice, beautiful open program. I can, if I want, I can put the comments in here. Normally you just use one star here and you put space star, and I'll just do this right. File name is HasNext.java. This is very useful when you're printing things out and these files get all over the place. SubmitJ is not so urgent because you have it in there, but other times it's useful. Every project I've always been on, you had to put the file name in the file because when you print it out, you gotta know where you're at. Author. I did have somebody put my name in here. I don't know if they were joking around, but please put your own name. Sometimes I'll put my email in there, so if people see the program and they need to get a hold of me, they can get access to me. And then it's going to be section. This is going to be cs116, and it's 01, Tuesday, Thursday, winter 2017. And then description. This program demonstrates how to check for, I'll say check end of input. I usually try to align my description along here like this, but it really doesn't matter, does it? As long as it looks clean. Then we have this. You know, you don't put your comment thing. You're not being clever by putting your comment over here. That's not good. That's not the way that the Java culture is. It's like mispronouncing. You know, what do the British say? They always have words that sound good when they say it, but it sounds horrible when we say it. You know, this is the style for a Java top block comment. Then we'll import the scanner. Then left aligned, and then we'll do public class. Sorry, and it's going to be HasNext. Now, you have to be really careful about using reserved words, keywords in the language. Under low or even method names and everything like that. HasNext is a scanner method name, right? But it's lowercase h. But this class is uppercase. So here I'll put a comment in here. Say end of class HasNext. I usually do that if I'm writing it straight from scratch like this. I pop that comment right in there. Now I'll hit a tab. I'm tabbing over once. Public static void and the main method. The main method always has this, well, at least for this class, it always has this string args. Now when we get into functions, we will start putting comments above each function, but for now we're not worried about that. And when I open up a brace, I close it. I like to close it right away. So I'll type in here end of method main. Usually you have lots of methods inside a program. So everything else we do inside of this is going to be 2 tabs over. Now we have the data file input.data, and we want to grab the input out of there. Anybody have any ideas how we can do that?
Use a scanner.
Thank you so much. Yes, we got to use a scanner. That's why I imported it. So let's create a new scanner. So we're going to say scanner sc gets new scanner. Thanks for helping me out, guys, because so I know it's early in the morning, but whatever you can do to fire me back up, I appreciate. So system.in, and bling, we got ourselves a shiny new scanner. Now we got a scanner, but I got to scan something. How am I going to scan it? We'll try somebody different this time. Who wants to do that? Anybody? How about Robert? You feel like it? Which one's Robert? Or one of you guys Robert? Yeah, Robert. You're Robert. Oh, shoot, you're over there. Can you do it?
What?
I wanna read in the first number out of that file.
I just gotta check for the next input.
I can do that. I can say next, right? sc.next int. They're all ints, so we're just going to read ints. Is that going to do the trick, or do I got to add anything? If I just read the next integer, it's got to go somewhere, right? I got to have a variable. So, dang it, I forgot. So what's you want? Can you try? I'm just going to get this whole row, and then I'll get the next.
Yeah, Brandon.
Brandon. Okay, yeah, sorry, Brandon. Yeah. If my map's not right, I'm going to learn your name. I swear to God. By the time we finish this course, you're going to be my best buddy. But it takes a minute. So yeah. So how can I get this number so I can use it to do something with? I want to print it out, right? I want to read it and print it out.
Set variable equal to that.
Okay, I love it. I love it. We will create a variable int, let's call it n because it's going to be a number. And I guess that's all we really need to do, right? We don't really need to do anything else. And then we want to assign it, right? Looks good. Nothing wrong with that. Now, let's take a look at this. So what this does is, all it does is it creates a scanner, declares a variable, and it's assigning the value of the first number in this case it's going to be the input file, to this variable n. So, I mean, some people will say that you should put, I don't know what the other professors say, but to me it's kind of silly to say, create a scanner when you just created a scanner. Anybody who knows Java is going to know that. So you're kind of like insulting their intelligence. You don't need to comment this here. The only time you might need to do it is if you're going to create 2 or 3 scanners and you want to let people know you have multiple scanners in your program. But normally you have one scanner, it's up there, everybody knows it. I don't know. You have to make a comment. So if you put a comment, I'm not going to take credit off. If you add one or not put it, it's the same. To me, it's the obvious statement. So I don't know. Declaring this n, you might want to say what n is. So n is the the most recently read user input, right? You don't have to, but when you use a vague number like n, it's not really clear what it is, right? So you could call this most recently. Some Java programmers write these big, long variable names. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to get into that argument. Just do however you want to do it. But this one, you might want to comment. Now here, it's not a bad idea to say read input, because this is typically a major step. So read user input. You could put it to the end, or you could put it at the top. It doesn't really matter. But this one, you'd probably, this line right here, you would not put in your diagram. This line right here, you would not put in your diagram, right? But this line, you absolutely would put in your diagram, right? Reading the user input, that is going to be in your diagram. So in your diagram, you might put in, input n. That would be what you would have in your diagram, right? Or you could just put read user input in your diagram. That's also fine. Remember, the diagram's for people, not for computers. So we've read the user input. We have n. Now we want to print it out. That's also usually a major step in a program. How am I going to print this thing out? What's your name again? I'm sorry, man.
Adam.
Adam, right. You said that. Brandon, Robert, Adam. All right, Adam. What do we got to do to print this sucker out? System.out.println, exactly. What do I put in here? It's just n. So now it's not a bad idea to prompt the user for input when you're expecting user input, but remember, we're just going to be reading from a file. We're using the submit_j program to kind of fake out the Java system, so we're reading from a file. So in this case, we don't need to put that prompt, right? But if it was really a user input thing, you need to put a print. So let's try this. I'm going to Control O, Control X, and what I'll do is I will just do submit_j and show you how well, it compiled the first time. Usually that's not the case. Yes, I want to preview my assignment. So source files, HasNext.java. Here's everything, all nice and neat. Data files, input.data, execution. It prints out the number 34. It's exactly what I wanted, right? Do I want to print my assignment? No. So now let's suppose that I create another input. Okay. I'll call this one, I'll just say touch. You can create a file by just saying touch. It creates an empty file. And I'll call this input blank dot data. And if I do cat input blank dot data, it shows there's nothing in there, but the file exists. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do submit J again. What do you think's going to happen if I try to run that program on an empty file? Well, let's find out. It freaked out. It tried to run the program, but at line 19 it says, I do not know what to do. So so let's take a look at what's going on here. Let's go to Pico. What it's doing is it's doing this. It's reading the user input, but there is no input. So what we want to do is we want to check, before we read the user input, we want to check that there is any user input. That's where you use this thing called HasNext. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if sc.HasNext, sorry, this is going to be a lowercase HasNext, does it bother you when I don't use the braces around these things? If there's only one line of code, I usually don't put the braces in there because it looks cleaner to me. If you want, you can always put in your ifs. You can always put the braces too. And if you have a big long if statement, you can put end if whatever. You say end if HasNext. You can do that if you want to. So now what this says is if there is a item in the file, then read it in. Otherwise, don't. And we probably want to do this also. We'll do Control K, Control U, Control K, Control U, whoops, Control U, and here do Control K, Control U. So technically this, now I've kind of made a an if statement here, and this will say if there is input in the file, right? If there is input, even is even better. So now what will happen if there's input, right? Read the user input, print the user output. And then if there's not input, what would I do? I'll just print that there's no output. Else system.out.println no input. So basically, if there is, so basically, as a matter of fact, I think this is going to be HasNext int. To be honest with you, let me just double check that because I always forget these things. Java HasNext int. Yeah, it's HasNext int. So when you're doing your program, you're going to be looking for the patient name. The patient name is always the first thing, so you'll use HasNext. But in this particular example, all of them are integers, so I'm going to do HasNext int. I could do HasNext but then I'd be reading the number in as a string. I want to read it as an integer in this case. So here I check to see if there is input. Then I read the input, and then I print the output. You kind of think of it like this. Here I've got this eraser here, right? I've got the eraser, and the HasNext thing is like this. It just looks to see if the eraser is there. It just looks really quick to see if it's there. If it's there, so HasNext means look and check. If it's next means take it. I got it now. It's mine. Make hot little hands. So so HasNext is just kind of like glance in there. Let's check and see if this flies. Wow, it did work. I'm always unconfident about my compiles. I'm going to preview it. Yes, I do. So here HasNext, and then it does the input.data. It does 34 as we expected. But the input blank data, you see there's no data in there. Execution, no input. That's what we want. So that's all fine and dandy. We all know how to do if-then statements, but we're not here to do if-then statements. We're here to do loops. Who's feeling ambitious that they can make a loop? Let's keep on going. So here we'll just read if there's input, do this. Next thing I want to do is I want to do a loop. Now first thing we need to decide is, do we want to do a while loop, a do-while loop, or a for loop? Who thinks while loop? 0. Who thinks do while loop? 0. Who thinks for loop? 0. Great. Well, it can't be a for loop, because a for loop you have to know how many times you're going to iterate. Right? The only way we could make a for loop work is if we did a for loop for a number higher than would possibly be the input file, and then did a break when we got out of it. Right? But this is not really a system where you want to use a for loop. What you really want to do is you want to use either a do loop or a do while loop. Sorry, a while loop or a do while loop. So it depends on how you tackle this thing. So if I do this, I could say if it has the next integer, right? HasNext int gives me a value of true or false. But I also could do while HasNext integer. Right? So let's try it a couple of ways maybe. Let's try reading through this file, and I'll say while, that's the first one we learned in the thing, HasNext int. Now, I will say this, if I only have one number in the file, this one, when the if does HasNext int, then it'll be true. But as soon as I read the next int, then when I do HasNext, it's going to look at the next int. So I'll create another data file to give you an example of that. So here, I'm going to say while HasNext int, I'm just going to do a cut uncut, Control K, U, and then I'm going to do a U in here. And I'm going to do a Control K, U here, Control K, Control U. This is very primitive text editing. So here what I'm going to do is, if it has the next int, I'm going to grab the next int and print it out until I'm done with all my ints, right? It's really not that complicated, right? I think you can get a hold of that. The HasNext thing, you need to totally grasp this. So let's just Control O, Control X, and what I'm going to do is I've got input. I'm going to rename this How do I rename a file? It's MV. So I'm going to call input.data. I'm going to rename that input5.data because I got 5 numbers in there. Then input blank, I'm going to do input. I'm going to call it input0.data because that lets me know that I have 0 numbers in there. And I'm going to create a file called input2.data. And that's going to have 2 numbers in it. So now I've got three test data sets. One of them that has 5 numbers in it, one of them that has 2, one that has 0. Let's see what happens if I submit J. Did not compile because I didn't say sc.HasNext. Georgie, come on now, buddy. This is more normal. Normal programming is you have compile errors. That's real life programming. I don't know. Let's try this again. All right, now we're getting somewhere. So now it processed everything, and let's preview my assignment. The first one, we have input 0, and it gives us no input. That's what we expected, right? When it hit the while loop, it didn't do anything because there's nothing still in there. With the 2 items, it printed out 1 and 2, which is what we would want, right? It grabbed the first item, and then it went to the while loop, and it just went through 1 time. And with the input 5, it did 5 of them. Okay. So is there any questions about how to use this HasNext? Do you think you're ready to tackle program 4? All program 4 is program 3 inside of a while loop. That's pretty much it. And the while loop has next in it. So the only real way to get your arms around this thing is to practice. Can anybody tell me how we can do this with a do while? Anybody feeling ambitious? I guess we can still go after this last crew. I think you're next. What is it? And. Do you know how we would do the exact same thing with a do loop? Yes. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to comment out this whole thing. I'm just going to comment it out by putting this block comment. This is probably the most common reason to use comments more than coding, right? And I'm just going to start fresh. So I have this. I'm just going to ignore all this code down here. And let's do a do loop. So do you know how to do that? It's going to be do. It's do while. Basically, the difference, like while, it may never run. It may never run 1 iteration. Do, it always runs at least 1. That's why this is trickier. Because what if there's no input in there? Well, how about Noor? Do you know how to tackle it? Really? Does anybody? Does anybody know how we can tackle a do while? Do the same thing we just did, but with a do while. All right, it's a hard question. Sorry, I gave you So basically, here's what we got to do. If we do a do statement, if I do a do, it's going to execute the first line, right? So we can't do that unless there's actually an item in there. Otherwise, you'll get an error. So a lot of times, if with the most common errors are when there's 0 records in the file, or there's only 1 record in the file. A lot of times, programs will blow up when that happens. They expect it to have a lot of records in there. But what we can do is we can do the same if check, right? We can check to see if there's a number in there before we read, right? The other possibility, that's basically, we have to do that. The other thing we could do is check if there's a number in there, and if there is, then do the do. So I'll do it the first way, then I'll do it the second way. So here's the do. Here I'll say if sc.HasNext int, then n gets sc.nextInt, right? Else break. That's what you typically see in a do while. And then here you can say while, like what you were saying, Ann. That's where you put it at the end. HasNext int. But this is kind of a waste of time because if we're going to have to check this every time, and we're checking it twice every time we go through the loop, it'll work, but why do that? So here I'm going to create a little sub I don't know what you want to call it, block of code, whatever, if block, and we're going to print this thing, right? So now what's happening is I'm executing this block of code every time, once, but it's checking to see if there's a number before it does it. It's an awkward way of doing it, but this is the problem with the do while structure compared to the while structure. So if there is a number, it prints it. If not, it doesn't, and it breaks out of this loop when there's no more integers there. So Control O, Control X. I mean, it's the same output as what we had the last time, so nothing mysterious there. New. Now the other way to do this do while is to put the do while inside of an if statement. So I could move this here. I'm going to cut this, uncut it here, and basically, if there is a number in there, then do the do while, right? Okay. So if there is a next integer, then do the do while. Otherwise, don't. You see that basically it's the same thing. Do you see what happens? So basically, if there's a next integer, go ahead and go into that loop. Right? If there's not a next integer, you don't even bother doing it. Six one, half dozen of the other. Control O, Control X. I mean, it's the same output, so it's nothing really. It's basically different ways of different ways of doing exactly the same thing. So we did a do while, and now if I was going to do a for loop, do you know how to do a for loop? Anybody know how to do a for loop? Basically, in that one, you say for int I gets whatever to this thing, I plus plus, and then. But the problem is we don't know how many records there could be. There could be an infinite number of records in there, right? Or a very, very large number. So we wouldn't know when to end our for loop. If we did, we would have to break out of it. Anyway, hopefully that gives you an idea of how to do HasNext. Any questions about that? Yeah.
So we couldn't have coded that in NetBeans?
The problem, yes, we could code it in NetBeans, but the problem is there's no. This HasNext thing is for user input, and so SubmitJ fakes out the user input. So it's really an awkward thing. You have to create a file. You can, but you have to do file I/O directly. You can't use this HasNext. You want to see it in NetBeans?
No, sorry.
It won't work in NetBeans because if you'd have to prompt the person to put a next integer in there, and so the question would be, did they type anything in, right? So I'll do another program just to show you what I'm talking about. That will work in NetBeans, because it is a very good question. Let's go to NetBeans and let's just try this straight in NetBeans. I always debate whether we should even have SubmitJ. If you have a whole bunch of test data, it can be helpful. But if you don't have a lot of test data, it makes it more awkward. So let's go File, New Project, and Java Application, Next. Finish. Tools, Options, Fonts, 36. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to create a scanner. And then we will create the same integer n that we were doing before. So you can assign it to anything. This thing usually makes me initialize variables, so I've gotten used to that. And now let's just get the user input and then print it. So we'll say n gets sc.nextInt, right? System.out. And this time I am going to prompt just so that it's a little bit less annoying. I'm going to do system, I'm going to do this, sorry. Now let's just run this thing. Let's tell me to enter a number. I'll enter it in 234, and it prints 234. No mysteries, right? But if I run this thing and I print in and I hit enter and hit nothing, oh, this is making me keep on doing it till I enter an integer. It won't let me break out of it. So this really doesn't handle the no input thing. Run, stop build. So what we really want to do, if you want to read from a file, you have to go into Files, and then you have to create a file in here. I think you click on the Files thing, and I think if we go in here and do new. Oh man, I think it's new, other, and it's going to be empty. What is it? Other, empty file. That's what it is. And then you hit next, and then you give the file a name. We'll call this input.data. Finish that. And then inside of this file, we can have 1, 45, 32, 98. We can have all these numbers in here. And so then we can do reading from a file. So we'll save this. So basically, this input data file is now a new file in the NetBeans package. the Java package, which is probably the right way of doing it. This is a more the NetBeans is a more modern way of doing things, but there's no submit J. Scanner system.in is to read the user input, not a file. There's also file input, but that's another part of the course. So that's why I just said let's just do it in Pico, because mission 1, what I really want you to focus in on is how to do loops. That's all. Did we do a loop project last time? Did we do like the greatest divisor one? Okay. Do you guys feel comfortable with loops? If you're ready, if you think you can do loops, then we're good to go with loops. We can move on to the next topic. They're not really that complicated, but I doubt you would have figured out this thing without knowing about HasNext, though. I'm pretty sure. That was hopefully a useful piece of information for you. So that being the case, why don't we take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to hit Chapter 6, which is going to be